Welcome everyone, and it's lovely to see you all again after last night. Friends, old and new, I hope you can enjoy your time in our beautiful city. The next 2 days will see us discuss shared global challenges, forge new connections, and together seek solutions to the pressing questions of our time. But I do first want to pay tribute to my good friend, Congressman Pittenger, whose personal drive once again brings us together here for the 24th Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum. Robert, your sense of mission and leadership really is second to none, so thank you ever so much for all you have done. I do also want to pause to remember the man who first introduced us, Sir David Amess. He was murdered by a terrorist in 2021 in his constituency of Southend of Sea as he was meeting with his constituents and serving them. David was a staunch supporter of this forum. He should have been stood where I am today, and he should have been welcoming you all to London. And I hope that we can all keep him and his family in our minds over the next few days, because few people better represent the virtues of service and democracy than David did. And for those of you who knew him, he did so with the cheekiest smile that none of us will ever forget in Parliament. The first of these forums was held back in 2014, when the newly elected president of China, Xi Jinping, was beginning his purge of potential rivals, and Vladimir Putin had just launched his illegal invasion of Ukraine through Crimea. We missed the warning signs then, and we failed to act, and we failed to deter. Instead, we buried our heads in the sand in the hope that our values, the benefits of market economies and democracy, would in and of themselves be enough to sway even these most callous of men and their dreams of empire at the barrel of a gun. Now, 9 years later, the threat posed from these autocrats and other hostile states and actors is first and foremost on our minds, because the failure to deter comes at a high price. Now, in the first 2 decades of this century, we focused on terrorists who behaved like states. Now we face states who behave like terrorists. These hostile states are systematically seeking to undermine the 4 pillars that help us uphold peace: democracy, rule of law, the international rules-based system, and the rejection of violence as a means to sovereignty. We see this in the daily reports of cyber attacks, debt traps, private military organizations, the weaponization of food and resources, the dissemination of disinformation, orchestrated campaigns to hijack multilateral organizations, and to take them to their logical conclusion, the use of hard military force to achieve political aims both at home and abroad. Whether it be in Russia's renewed illegal invasion of Ukraine and its Wagner war dogs, or ethnic cleansing in Darfur, attempts to destabilize Kosovo and Bosnia, Iran's use of torture and rape against its own girls, or the Sahel, and even China's genocide against 2 million of its own Muslim citizens. These regimes are orchestrating mass atrocities to maintain and expand their power base and to erode the rules-based system upon which global peace rests. Be sure that they are trying to rip apart the unity that brings us here today. In the UK, we also face consistent attacks, be it espionage, disinformation to discredit our democracy, the theft of intellectual property, the funding of groups to rip apart our societal fabric, or even the use of violence and threats on British streets to silence dissidents, refugees, critics, and even parliamentarians. I and many of my colleagues know this firsthand. Sanctioned for speaking out against genocide. So how do we protect that which is so precious to us? First, we must together make the case that defense is never an escalation. There is a deliberate attempt by hostile states to invert the truth and present those that they attack as the aggressors. This is most clear in Russia's assertion that Ukraine and NATO are responsible for Putin's illegal and brutal invasion. This is, of course, nonsense. NATO is a defensive alliance, and those in Ukraine who wish to join before the war have been vindicated by that aggression. I would urge you all to speak to our distinguished guests from the Baltic states over the coming days to understand the reality of life as a previously occupied people, now neighbouring a terrorist state. Likewise, China uses visits by Taiwanese officials to other countries as an excuse to mimic invasions, to edge the median line ever closer to Taiwan shores, and to threaten parliamentarians like me that no good end comes to troublemakers. It is only a fool who would observe the People's Liberation Army Navy practicing the encirclement of a free and democratic Taiwan and not conclude that CCP is the aggressor. Defense is never an escalation. So how do we best defend ourselves and the international order? The answer lies in three key priorities: deterrence, resilience, and commitment. So let us start with deterrence. There is a saying in the UK that prevention is always better than the cure. This saying really makes clear why deterrence is so important, and the last decades have seen a failure of deterrence diplomacy. Regimes have felt increasingly confident taking violent, unilateral action, always committing atrocities in their path. We must reverse this trend and make clear to would-be perpetrators the consequences of their actions. And once a red line is set, it must be defended, and that is a failure of countries like mine that we have failed to do so. Backsliding always seems an attractive option in a crisis, called by so-called peace organisations that will uphold and protect the peace. It does not. It emboldens other and further endangers the cause of peace. We must also recognise that without national security, there is no economic security, and a Chinese invasion of Taiwan would be catastrophic for our shared global economy. And yet there are countries who are choosing to feign neutrality on the renewed illegal invasion of Ukraine. What I ask is the need to be neutral when a legal act is perpetrated, when a sovereign, non-threatening country is invaded, when war crimes are being committed on a daily basis, when food is being weaponized by the aggressor and yet somehow the victim is expected to answer for those actions, when an actor uses violence to secure falsely claimed sovereignty. It is a farce. We must deter future aggression. Prevention is always better than a cure, but we do not do so by feigning neutrality or looking the other way. Deterrence is vital in a geopolitical context, and we also need to see improvements in atrocity prevention, whether Myanmar, Ethiopia, or Sudan. We are witnessing a renewal of mass human rights abuses by perpetrators confident that they will never face justice. So we must ensure together that multilaterals like the International Criminal Court are strengthened. Multilaterals are the sum of their parts, of their members. I do not criticise the organisations themselves. I criticise that we have not chosen to fight for those organisations that we created to make sure they can be effective. And Vladimir Putin's absence from South Africa for the recent BRICS summit is a notable example of how multilaterals, when enforced, can have an impact. Now, whilst deterrence is always preferable, we must also be realistic and we must plan to fail. And that is my second priority, resilience. For me, resilience is a multi-decade endeavour. As hostile states look for novel ways to infiltrate and undermine our societies, it becomes more important that resilience is cross-government and cross-nation. From future-proofing supply chains to nurturing tech sectors, foreign policy is not the remit of just our foreign ministries. I have successfully lobbied the British government to tighten national security clauses in our procurement bills, in our education bills, in our health bills, protecting our genomics, protecting the future of our children's minds. We have to make sure that we deal with hostile actors in every possible sphere. Clamping down on hostile foreign investment, closing illegal police stations operating on our streets. Autocratic states will continue to attempt to shame and blackmail us into not making ourselves more resilient if we allow them to. They will claim once again that decisions made for defence are the next step of an offensive. Russia played this game for far too long, and now she is adopting it. And it is only with a consistent mindset of building resilience across government and society that we can insulate ourselves from malign influences abroad and at home. Finally, we must demonstrate steadfast commitment to our principles and our allies. We have to reinvest and compete within international institutions that are under attack from hostile states. They seek to smash these organisations for their benefit. It is through a constellation of alliances around the world that we can uphold the rules-based system that makes our multilaterals more effective and protects us all. Because they, as I say, are the sum of their parts. We must fight for leadership roles within them so that countries who believe in democracy and human rights lead them. We must refuse to be told that the world can be divided into spheres of influence that some are seeking to create. Because in their world, friendship does not mean respecting sovereignty. they still embrace the principle of indivisible security. Indeed, it was not long ago that my friends in Ukraine referred to Russia as a brother country, a sentiment quickly lost as your women are being raped and Russian missiles, shells and bullets rain down on civilian targets to terrorize the population. To expansionists like Putin, kinship means nothing, and sly grins of friendship exist only to trick and exploit. Meanwhile, there are friendships waiting for free-minded societies around the world, but we, in the UK government, need to make sure that they are meaningful and that when people take a leap of faith to stand by us, we show up. That when we clasp that hand, it is not a temporary visit on a jet. It is a meaningful, long-standing relationship. So we must prove that we can and we will, because we do face a generational challenge. As autocracies seek to undermine democracy and expand their own influence, we must not be found wanting. And this is why this conference is timely and important, bringing together almost 300 parliamentarians from over 60 countries. We must discuss these shared problems, we must not shy away from honesty, and we must devise workable solutions. Over the next 2 days, we'll discuss everything from human trafficking to AI, to cellular IoT modules, to cybersecurity and other threats, emanating largely from autocrats. So I hope in these discussions we can keep those three principles in our mind: deterrence, resilience, and commitment, because we are fighting for our conception of freedoms, and because defense is never an escalation, and what we are defending, democracy, human rights, rule of law, the right to self-determination, these are the lifeblood of our freedoms, and they are more than worth defending. I wish you a wonderful few days in London, and I hope that our conversations send us all back to our countries with a renewed mission, a new sense of unity, an absolute certainty of what our mission is. Thank you ever so much.